Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks again. I appreciate you showing up for our webinar. Um, I'm Paul Gandard. I'm the National Sales Executive for Transportant. I'd like to spend a little time this morning just sharing a little bit about who our presenters are. I will let them eventually introduce themselves, but we've got some great panelists here that'll share a lot of information about this student reunification and bus safety and trying to become more proactive with this. We've got Jim French, who's a presenter for the I Love You Guys Foundation. Ron Gann, who's actually a transportation security inspector for TSA. I have a lot of surprising information about what TSA can do for you. And then also Jeff Baird, who's a transportation director, actually, and a customer of Transportant in the Liberty School District in Liberty, Missouri. Just a couple of housekeeping notes here that everybody will be muted, but there is an ask a question feature, so please feel free to ask questions. Anything that you might pop into your mind as you're going through this. And then we will try to save some time at the end of this to answer a few of the questions. And if we can't get to answering all the questions, which we probably won't, our presenters have agreed to answer all the questions that are pertaining to their presentation. So So a little bit, just very quickly, who is Transportant? So Transportant, we're actually a fully integrated system that provides 21st century technology for school buses. We only work with school buses. We're not in the trucking industry. We provide live video, which is very unique in this market, GPS, student tracking, and also turn-by-turn directions. So we're one of the few companies out there that have the ability to do everything, and that you're just working with one technology. And why we chose to become a partner in love with the I Love You Guys Foundation. This is a quote from Tom Oliver, who's actually the executive director of the Wisconsin School Safety Coordinators Association. And it's kind of interesting that I have this quote because this is actually where I first ran into the I Love You Guys Foundation. I was had a booth at this conference, and Andy Arnold, who's one of the well-known presenters for the I Love You Guys Foundation, came up to me and said, we get a lot of questions about, we have a lot of information about how to keep our students safe while they're in the buildings. We really don't have anything to address what's going on with the safety of our students, or as much with the school buses. So as we started talking, we found out very quickly that our goals aligned very, very, very well, and that we're trying very hard to try to keep all the students safe, whether it be in the building or also now in the school bus, which is equally as important. I'm going to introduce our first presenter here. This is Ron Gann from the TSA. Ron, if you'd just like to introduce yourself and kind of tell them where you're from and things.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. As Paul said, my name is Ron Gann. I am a transportation security inspector, and I work with the Transportation Security Administration. My job is specifically dealing with surface transportation and helping out in matters of security and ensuring that we're safeguarding our transportation on wheels. It hits the surface of the earth. We even go as far as dealing with boats and working with the U.S. Coast Guard and dealing with the marina side of things. But I've got a pretty neat job, I'd like to call it, because I do have children as well, and they're involved in school, and so I take on this job with a bit of a passion because my kids are going to school, and they're transported by these buses, and so we dig into school buses as well as trucks, along with mass transit, both the large and small transit. And so we try to do our best to get out and spread the word about security programs and all that we can help out with training. I have basically two big roles with TSA, and And as you might figure that you would be aware of TSA with the blue uniforms out at the airport and might not even know that we exist as a surface program here, but we have an area of this mode of transportation that we deal with in compliance for various regulations that are out there that Congress sets forth. That is a kind of a very small portion of what we do in our surface area. My aviation counterparts tend to have a little bit more involvement there, especially since we had our events of 9/11 over 20 years ago. And so we also have a cargo area of a mode of transportation. But in our surface area, we deal a bit with our freight and passenger rail, with some over-the-road bus companies that travel into our larger areas such as Chicago, New York, LA, and such. And so we do have some regulations for those individuals, but we do a lot of going out and providing these free, no-charge programs where we can provide training for you. And so we do this nationwide. Our offices are not at every airport, but I wanted to share, I don't know, Paul, if you have that screen there. We have, you can see here, all over the nation. I know it's a little small for you and what you might be able to see, but on this map here, anything that's marked with a blue diamond is where we have a surface transportation office. My office is based out of Omaha, Nebraska. We are responsible for Nebraska and Iowa and all that's involved there transportation-wise and going out and spreading the word. All my counterparts and their offices are obviously responsible for other areas of their responsibility. So if you have an area there that is close to you, that's on that map, we certainly can get you information on how you can contact TSA to get some training and some of the programs I'm going to talk about this morning, and I'll be able to help you out in that capacity. Or you can reach out to me. Paul will have some information for you to contact me via email, and if I don't know who to contact, I'll make certain to find out who it is in various offices throughout the United States. But that's pretty much kind of a small but maybe large amount of information I have in what I do for TSA.
So the TSA First Observer Plus program, I was very surprised to learn that you guys did that. This is no cost to the school. Can you describe the TSA First Observer program for us, please?
Absolutely, and that's the key word. There is no cost to any of the schools that choose to opt to have us come out and do some risk mitigation training, essentially. So if you have a normal safety seminar or discussions or meetings that you have with the drivers throughout the year, we can come in and actually do some training there with the First Observer Plus program. It is essentially I would say, a bit of an exposure of we've had for years for TSA See Something, Say Something campaign. And this expands it a bit to where we talk about how to observe, assess, report situations that are going on in the everyday work of a bus driver. And so it's about an hour-long presentation with video and various things to talk about terrorism and what they do. So that is what the First Observer program does. We do have other programs that we use to train for risk mitigation. In some ways, active shooter is one of the areas that we do come and do training for. We work in collaboration with the local law enforcement because they will be the responders or the first responders in those situations. And TSA is just there to help you mitigate that risk and provide the training and provide the active shooter awareness. In that, as well as we have insider threat programs that we do training on, and various other amount of training that we deal with improvised explosive devices. We have experts and professionals that deal with that to help drivers recognize what an explosive looks like if someone were to leave that on their bus. And so that is one of the many programs we offer. We do offer, Paul, I'll mention to everyone that we have the base assessment for security assessment. It actually is a program where we come in and we do an assessment on the security of the school. And once we go through that program, we come back and provide options for consideration to help them improve. It's, again, no cost. There's no obligation. There's no regulation. There's no. It's all voluntary, basically. And so we come in and we do this. And after we're finished with that involvement, if you choose to do so, there is a program through FEMA with our federal government that they do have non-disaster grants that are available. That with your involvement with TSA, you may apply for those grants. And I've been told, it's not so 100% accurate, but I've been told that about 90% of the people who apply for those grants generally get them to help them with security things such as putting up fences, installing security cameras, you name it, anything to help you in that security area. And so that's just a little bit of some of the things we do. We do things of planting bags on buses to see if the bus drivers are doing their security checks completely, helping them out with that. Tabletop exercises. We help develop security programs to develop a plan, and of course, again, with the risk mitigation activities that we can provide for the schools. And every single thing that I've just mentioned to you is free of charge, no cost to the school. We provide that as a government foundation, and we work with your transportation director to accomplish all those items.
Yeah, that's really good information. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, is there funding available? So if you go through that TSA First Observer program, that FEMA does have a lot of money available. So another question for you, Ron, how should the school bus departments assess their own security postures? How should they go about identifying their own security risk, and what should they do to enhance their protections?
And that's a great question, Paul, because, I just mentioned about the BASE. Of course, we're government, we have to have an acronym for everything. So, but BASE, it stands for Base Assessment for Security Enhancement. We have about roughly 120 security action item questions that we come in and do the interview with people such as the transportation director, human resources, your mechanic, your janitors. We talk to everybody and ask these questions about how to best improve your security, and we base that, take those answers and come back with an analysis based off of a national standard of how to improve those security items in that area. So this is a way that they can, we can come in and help them with this, where we have these questions based off of that national standard to find out exactly where they stand. It's very likely in that interview, we're going to find a lot of holes that we need to fill in order to make that program better at security, and just being able to do that. So this is how we identify those risks, and we'll be able to come back with an executive summary report that you can provide to the superintendent or principal of the school, and be able to show them these are the areas that we need to improve in, and this is why we need funding for that area and so forth, to be able to help identify those risks, to hopefully be proactive again about the situation versus finding out later, oops, we should have done something about that. So it's just, taking the initiative to do better by going through this program called the BASE. You asked about how they should identify their risk. Well, I would say training. A lot of times the bus drivers and school systems, they have a lot of safety meetings. They have maybe even a safety board or a safety director, and they will meet on a periodic basis of having safety meetings, but a lot of times they don't include a lot of security items. So it'd be good to identify maybe a security team that they can focus on those needed security awareness items, maybe even have exercises to identify the vulnerabilities that they might have, and just be aware of industry standards of a security practice. If you're networking with other school districts, both direct and indirect, research to learn some what works and what doesn't for the school system for other places. And it's just being proactive. Again, just getting in there and doing your best to mitigate that risk of anything that could happen to transportation. The biggest thing, though, that I will leave you with all of this is making certain that you're working in harmony with the school administrators, with the transportation side of things, because a lot of times schools will have a great setup and a plan for something such as active shooter, but they normally don't include the bus drivers, the transportation side of things. And I'll give you a quick example. Just 2 weeks ago, we went over to a school in Iowa And we were there for a short time to do a base assessment with that school, and the school was Perry High School in Perry, Iowa. And the very next morning, they had their shooting. They had an actual shooter that came in, and they took the life of a small individual, and just found out within the last 48 hours that the principal has passed away too because of that. And so with that situation, we're going to go in and be able to help provide them some training. But the biggest thing we found out that came through that was one of their bus drivers, or the buses, were late to school that morning. And on the news locally, they said to them, the kids said, if that bus wasn't late, we probably would have been a part of that shooting. And we found out that the only way the bus drivers have the way to communicate is through a cell phone. And so we're going to try to go in there and help them and give them some suggestions of improvement, and hopefully better that situation. Hopefully it never, ever happens again, obviously, but we're hoping to help them improve.
And then what proactive measures can school bus drivers take to protect their buses from potential attacks?
Just routine checks, just being vigilant about their bus. I know a lot of bus drivers take a lot of ownership with their buses, and so it's just a matter of going through and making certain that when they're doing their pre-check inspections, when they're doing their post-check inspections, it's important to make certain there's no child behind or any child left on the bus. We'll go through and make certain there are no potential suspicious items or bags left on that bus as well. The biggest thing is not be complacent in the job. I've told people throughout Iowa and Nebraska, here in the Midwest, it's very easy to get complacent in their job and just go with a routine. But anything can happen anywhere. And of course, we had the unfortunate event that happened in the middle of nowhere, basically in Perry, Iowa, just a couple of weeks ago. Park in secure areas with ample lighting, and if possible, lock the bus every single time you make a stop. Keep from any type of foreigner getting on the bus that shouldn't be there.
All right. Well, Ron, thank you so much. I appreciate all that great information. I got to know Ron a little bit in Iowa, and I was really surprised all of what TSA provided. That was very surprising to me. So thank you. I appreciate you sharing that information. Next
My pleasure.
presenter we're going to have on is Jeff Baird, who's our transportation director in Liberty, Missouri, and also current customer of Transportant. So Jeff, can you just introduce yourself quickly and we'll get to the questions.
Well, Paul, thanks for having me on. And I've had a career in operations management, and if I could categorize it in one word, it would be eclectic. I've been in retail, wholesale, and small business distribution. I've distributed video games in the 80s and 90s. And then I took a natural career change to become a care pastor for a decade. And I think that's a natural background for being a transportation director. So, along the way, one thing's been true. Every organization has to have an eye for safety and security. They have to go hand in hand. A safe bus is a secure bus, and a secure bus keeps student and staff safer. They can't be one without other. I can tell you, I experienced the First Observer program, and let me give you a little bit of details about how it worked. To summarize our experience, we had a training session with drivers, and they received insight into security threats on buses. The TSA brought in examples of what it might look like, how a backpack can turn into a bomb, and they gave the drivers awareness. Before the training, we might have had a few threats identified during pre-trip, maybe 3 out of 10, and we planted 10 suspicious items on buses on a surprise morning, unannounced to everyone, including me. It was truly a test. The instructors returned at 4 a.m., planted 10 bombs, and the drivers identified 7. I do not believe we would have gotten close to that number had we not had the training. And it gave us an opportunity to make everyone aware and on their toes. So obviously it helped us with security, but it did more. By focusing on one element of security, it drew employees into other details. It's a mindset change that leads to a culture change. We probably did not do enough with security before that, and I can say that our organization has changed as a result of it. Um, each year, we do intruder training. Our security staff tells the driver how to take control of the bus when someone tries to get on. You know, it's the kind of training that you never need until you do. And 3 times in one day after we began that program, a man wandering neighborhoods tried to get on a bus, 3 different buses with students. Each time the drivers performed their training, including as soon as they could get the door shut, pulling away, and they got to a safe place and called dispatch. It's the event that you'll never hear about because there wasn't an event. And I believe that the TSA training goes a long way to keep us safe in an environment where sometimes we're just trying to cover routes and be as safe as we can. But we can no longer call it the training we'll never use.
So how does your district use the bus technology you have now to assure the protection and safety for students on the bus?
Well, bus security is about speed and communication, and the communication has to be accurate. So the first thing that we use is the incident button that's on our tablet on the buses. If there's a disturbance or a major event, um, the driver pushes the incident button. What that does is immediately sends a video link to the control center back here, and they can click on that and immediately be taken to the video of that experience. Um, the bus security is about speed and communication, and the incident button's the start to that. We take that a step further. If we have a safety or a security issue with a student, we take that incident button and one of us reviews it. And before the student gets home, we've looked at the video sequence. And what we do is I call or someone calls the parents and just says, I need your help. You know, Johnny's not doing what he's supposed to on the bus, and this is what we need him to do. Can you help with that? And without fail, because it's personal and quick, the parents say, yes, we will, and we're sorry it happened. If we react 2 weeks later, um, the parents have been told 20 versions of the story by their child, and it's not as impactful. It's gone a long way to help us get better safety on the bus. We call it the 7 program because we want to get to the parents 7 minutes after the incident happened on the bus. The second thing that we do is we have a see and say program. We let the drivers see a sequence that they didn't know what happened, but they can um, visually see what happened. The only guideline there is that they don't write the student up. We're not going to go hunting for issues, but they'll take a screenshot and take it on the bus tomorrow and get the student before he sits down in the afternoon and go over it with him and ask for his help in correcting the behavior. We found that to be really good. Um, Timing. With live video and audio, we can be at the scene of an accident instantly. We recently had one where a car hit and ran one of our school buses and jolted it pretty hard. And the um, the detail we could get of the cameras looking out the window told us the make, the style, and the color of the car. The local police knew which direction it was going, and they set up interference down the road. And within 12 minutes, the hit and run driver was apprehended. So all of these things go a long way to helping us be safe and secure. The other thing that relates to security is that when we put this in and we had the parent app, lost child calls were virtually eliminated because whether the parent gets the information from the app or whether they call into dispatch, we know exactly where and when every child got on and off the bus. And that goes a long way to building understanding of what what the child's status is.
Good information. So, kind of a fun question. How is the student behavior on the bus now?
Well, it's about like when I went to school in 1974. Um, they just find different ways to do it. I will say we have more major events because back in the day, Harvey, my bus driver, if there was a disturbance, you got off the bus and he quit. He put out his cigarette and he would tell us, "I'll see you in a week." It's a little bit more complex now, but the biggest issue that we have is parents saying, "I need proof." And if we call them immediately, the "I need proof" goes away and it becomes personal with me asking them for help. My parents found out when I told them I needed a ride to school tomorrow. And that was effective too.
What does
So,
the technology? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, that's good. Um, I think the biggest thing that parents are concerned with, Paul, are where's my kid? Did they have an accident? Did they have an incident? Are they being taken care of? And the bus compass helps us to know where and when the child gets off the bus. But here's the other thing. During an accident, we have to have bus rosters, and we need to account for the kids um, in real time. There was an incident where a guy stole a bus and buried or went underground with the kids and held them hostage. And it took an hour and a half for that district to find out where the kids were. And we know immediately who's on, who got off, where they got off. So within minutes, we can account for every student in a security situation. The other thing is that we got the local SWAT team does exercises on our lot every year. And I wait around and go out with them and basically tell them about our technology system. And basically, they are aware that anytime there's an incident, we're like 2 minutes from their station. We can have it in their hands without them having to learn it in 2 minutes. We've tested also doing a video cast of the technology happening, and we can give them live shots into the bus. So we find that to be a creative way to do it. So we have the other piece, Paul, is that we have 250 administrators and secretaries and employees that have access to our director's dashboard. And what that did is it built confidence because they can go in and look at any route anytime and ask us any questions about that. That's been a fantastic way to get partnerships and belief that we're doing what we can. We encourage them to do that. In the beginning, other transportation directors said, "You're crazy. You're going to get complaints." And my answer to that was, we're going to get complaints anyway, and we need the students to be safe. So if they want to tell us what we're not doing, we welcome that.
Yeah, it is interesting because there's an account of ours in Iowa, and they brought our proposal to the board, and the superintendent made a comment. I ordered a pizza last night. I know where my pizza was. I knew exactly when it was going to be at my door, but I didn't know where all my kids were. So um, technology is quite amazing. So thank you, Jeff. I appreciate your time and efforts with this. Next up, we do have Jim French, who's a presenter for I Love You Guy, based out of Michigan. Jim, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. My name is Jim French. I'm an instructor explorer for the I Love You Guys Foundation. And my background is I was in education for 33 years. The last 22 to 24 of those years, I was either a high school assistant principal or principal. And so I can feel what Jeff is talking about as you deal with and manage those issues that come up. Many of those come to you and you're trying to sort them out and figure them out. So that technology tool seems like a great resource to kind of get to the heart of the issue, be able to address it, and then also be able to effectively communicate it. So really cool information to hear from Jeff. But really excited to be here today. And thanks, Paul, for inviting me. And just looking forward to sharing a little bit of insight.
Yep. So for you, can you give us a, 'cause some of us I know are very familiar with, I love you guys, but some of us are not. So can you give us just a quick overview of what the standard reunification method is?
Well, the standard reunification method, we call it SRM, because acronyms are key to everybody's work here to make it easy. But we have some focal areas in the standard reunification method. First, we talk about reunification occurring in different locations. So we recommend that you start to look at these four elements when it comes to a reunification. First of all, buildings, you have to be ready to do a reunification at your own site. When there's a non-emergency, non-criminal situation, could be a power outage, could be something, a gas leak in the area, but you have to be ready to run a reunification out of your own site for such an emergency. We also recommend that districts and buildings start to have a walking distance from the site, someplace that they could go if they need to get off-site in a rather quick, expedient manner. Could be like a gas leak on site where you just have to get them away from that site for safety reasons, but we recommend that you have a walking site as well. Third type, we also talk about a transported site. This would be for a non-criminal activity, but a scene where we can't walk away far enough, or we can't get to that location effectively using walking, so we need to have transport. We need to have support to get our kids and our staff out of that building and into another location. And the fourth recommendation we have, which is really kind of a more of a criminal situation, we call it a unified command reunification. That's where something criminal is at the site, and we need to transport students and staff away from that site to a new reunification site at a predetermined location. And so we talk about SRM. We start first with where are we going to do this reunification? And those are four examples that we like to try and have schools and buildings think about. The other key part of our standard reunification method is there's an accountability. In schools, we're accountable for all of our students. We're accountable for all of our staff and employees. So we have to be accountable at the site, but we also have to be accountable at the reunification site. So with an off-site reunification, we're there till the end. Just getting kids to the site at the beginning for our transportation folks is not going to be the end. We have to have your help throughout that process. And we're going to need you at the end, because we may need your help getting staff home, because maybe their cars are inaccessible and unable to be attained. So we need transportation folks. We need our drivers. We need their support throughout this reunification, not just to drop off kids, but throughout that process, because this is new. This is different. So you are critical to that reunification process. Also, a big part of this, when we talk about reunification, communication is the key. And the other thing that's really critical is you have to have a plan. So that's why we talk about those four sites, and we talk about having those in your plan and then walking through what that plan will look like when you get to your reunification site. So there are also a ton of resources that are available to kind of help designate roles, responsibilities, and we have what we call a reunification card. They're all free, available free as a download at iloveyoguys.org. And again, so free, we don't even ask for an email. We just want these things to be available to our communities, to our schools, to anybody that wants to access them. So on our website are videos, handouts, an SRM handbook, even some presentations that we give to our schools and to our folks. They're available, downloadable, and usable for your organization. So again, those things are available free of charge. Also, I want to talk a little bit about, when we do reunification, of some questions that I think we've got to start to pose to our transportation directors. In this day and age, obviously, we might be limited in resources. We might not have as many drivers as we need. We might be lacking in buses, etc. So what we talk about a lot from the foundation side is, what are your relationships? What are your relationships that you're building, cultivating, and making? And so we really talk about, are you making those relationships with your neighbors, either in the neighboring towns, neighboring areas, so that when these elements come up, you can lean on each other. Another thing that we talk about is, do you have a relationship with any of your county or city transport? Your municipal transport systems, because they can also be a support for you when these things come up. So again, we really talk a lot about relationships and trying to build those amongst the many facets of our community to help us in these situations. Last thing about SRM that I think is really important is communication. Again, I can't hit that hard enough. And for transportation directors, I think it's an important thing to start to think about is how do you communicate with your drivers when it's lunchtime? Do you have a system in place to maybe pull them in an emergency when they might be off the clock or not even in the area? Do you have a good communication in place for your drivers that are maybe on the road already and an emergency happens? Do you have that capability? And what are your plans to handle a reunification? Maybe when you are already on a route taking kids, how do you handle that and what's your plan? And so I think that the transport and solutions, and especially hearing from what Jeff had said, is that it sounds like the transport and solutions can really assist your organizations with these situations arise. So communication, that is crucial to anything that we do with the SRM. And so it's really cool to see how that connection goes with transport and your tech and some of the things we see with the standard reunification method.
So Jim, this isn't one of the questions we had planned, but can you talk just a little bit about the, okay, you have this standard reunification method plan. How do you practice that? How do districts actually run through that physically?
Well, we suggest that you start small. We have some trainings that we do with districts that are 2-day events where we do a lot of training, tabletop and discussion pieces, and then we do actual iterations where we have them walk through different roles as a reunification team, role as a parent, and role as a student, so that they can see how this interacts. We suggest you start small. If I'm a building, take just your staff. Have a group of them put together and make a group, the reunification team, make a group parents, and make a group students. You can start with 30 people, take 10 in each, and start to just practice the process. And so all of that information can walk you through it. There's a handbook on our website which will help you. Or if you feel that this is too much to tackle, we also are available to help support districts in that process as well. But you can start small, right in your building level, and model the process for yourself.
I think that's so important because when something does happen and everybody starts panicking, it's really nice to have practiced that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start the reunification focus within the district safety plan, and how do you include the transportation department?
Well, I think one of the things that is critical here is that they have to be at the table having these conversations. When you start talking about a district safety plan, transportation is a key component in any of these facets. And so it's important that they understand that. And I'm going to get away from SRM just a little bit and talk about our standard response protocol, because I think that's critical. That's a part of your district safety plan. So we have 5 actions we talk about. There's hold, secure, lockdown, evacuate, and shelter. Those 5 elements, do your bus drivers know how your district safety plan is going to ask you to respond in any given situation? We can have all 5 of those in all hazards approach, and we can address how we would handle it with each of those 5 actions. But do your bus drivers know? Is your transportation involved in educating your bus drivers on what happens when those things come up? So I'm going to give you just a little example. Talk about a secure. Let's say a building is in a secure because danger is around that building. It's somewhere in the immediate area of the building. So right now, the district has put that school, or the law enforcement has put that school into what we call secure. That means no one in, no one out. What and how are bus drivers going to respond if they're in the middle of dropping off kids? And I go back to Ron's example, TSA, if that bus was late, luckily those kids weren't involved in that situation, but they were put into a lockdown. Do those drivers know that they're in a lockdown and know not to let those kids off the bus? So a district safety plan is really good if it's communicated and if everybody understands how to handle those situations. So that secure discussion is going back to, again, communication. Do we have the ability to talk to our drivers and let them know what's happening at the building at a moment's notice to help avert a further dangerous situation? So I guess I asked some questions about that. Do you know what your district reunification sites are in your safety plan? Do you know where you're going to be taking them? What other support might be necessary based on that situation? Do you know how to get them there? Do you have plans figured out? So these are important things, I think, that we have to have transportation directors having conversations with the district, but we also have to have that translated back down to each and every driver. And that's an important part of this process, is that communication and that training, similar to what Ron's talking about, the training that's available. These things need to also be a point of emphasis with our drivers and everybody that handles our students.
Hey,
So
Paul, if I
before
could
we got into
interject,
this, yeah, go right ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
I got two things that I want to share. One is a way to train our people to respond to security threats is that when we have a lockdown in any school, regardless of the level of concern, we send enough buses to stage around the corner so that they can go in and pick up the kids on short notice. Because we don't take a chance on something happening and then us being called in because we've now wasted time. I think that helps our drivers to be aware of what's going on. The other thing is that we did our TSA. We're involved with them in the process, and one of the things their audit of our facility told us is that the fence needed repairs in certain areas, and we had had that on our list for years. And when they made that recommendation, we took it to the school board, and as Jim said, we gave visibility upward, and the fence got repaired in like 2 weeks. And so sometimes that outside influence goes a long way to getting attention within the district.
Awesome. That's exactly right. Thanks, Jeff.
I know, Jim, you talked a little bit about this, but you know, the connections with the standard reunification method and the transportation directive, but also the drivers, because that's the part, they are part-time, most of them, you know, and how do you make sure they're all on the same page, you know, with the rest of the district and the police and, you know, all the other people that are involved in that.
You know, and that's one of the things that I think is also a key part to discuss. You know, when you start talking about drivers, availability, priorities, you know, when these situations occur, you have to have those conversations before those situations arrive. As Jeff stated, I mean, putting buses there in the proximity of the school if a school goes into lockdown in preparation for the movement of kids, that's key because you have a plan. And so what I'm going to recommend is that all of our districts in attendance, please start to develop your plans and then the steps necessary to accomplish that plan. They must happen prior to a situation to enable you to respond quickly and efficiently. And so it's critical that we start to have those conversations with our drivers and within our departments. Second thing is, I think we also have to start thinking about, you know, we deal with this in schools when we talk about the different action steps that we have. We have our staff, but we have to be ready for our substitutes. Let's be honest. We have substitutes in place. Same thing happens within our bus drivers. We have sub bus drivers that come in, may not be full-time employees, but are these plans discussed and are those folks prepared for these situations that might come up? Some things to keep thinking about, especially as we talk about diminishing resources and people. When we have these situations come up in our districts, we're finding ways to become creative to handle staffing and other issues. So don't forget to include in that training and preparation for these types of situations. The other thing that I would really emphasize is that whatever the district safety plan and the actions that are labeled in there, we have our 5 actions, but you have to start incorporating that training into your bus drivers. They have to understand what those terms mean and what the action steps are going to be. Also, I think it's critical that your district transportation person be a key person at the table anytime you're having discussions, trainings, conversations. Even if you do walkthroughs or simulations, have them be a part of it. They have to see the process. They have to see the elements that are involved to help them become a part of the solution. And I think it's critical that we have them at the table. The other thing that I want to say as a thank you to all of our transportation folks and bus drivers is that this was something that I lived firsthand. Remember, a kid's very first experience when they get on that bus is that trip that they come to school. You are the start to their school day, and I want to say thank you for making that the best part of their day and a great start to their day. Because without that start to their day, everything else tends to fall apart if they have a bad experience, start today on a negative note. So I want to say thank you to all of you out there that do that work, because you're a big part of making sure that kids are successful and have a great day. So thank you from the I Love You Guys Foundation for your works to make this happen and to ensure that our kids are safe on the road and under your care.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I appreciate you saying that because, you know, I'm around a lot of different states and around a lot of transportation directors and assistant and bus drivers. It's a difficult job. I mean, it is really difficult. And what those folks do on a daily basis is really, really good. So we appreciate that. So thanks again. We did have one question posed, and that question actually is for Mr. Gann. So Ron, question for you. The question was, is that type of training available for private schools as well?
Absolutely. We do come in, we have some local schools in the Des Moines, Iowa area. I'm just speaking off of personal experience here, and I think I can for that of all others. It doesn't matter whether it's private, public. Just if you need the help, we're there to provide it for you.
Okay. Yeah, so I highly recommend that you take advantage of that TSA because there's a lot of things that they do. And so just for information purposes, one, I want to say thank you to everybody that showed up and also a huge thank you to our 3 panelists that put up with me, as this is the first time our company's done this. So anyways, I do really appreciate your patience and working with us. But also, if you have any interest in contacting Transportant, and a copy of this or a link to this recording will go out to every participant and also to every participant that maybe didn't show up today. So if you have any questions or want to contact us, here's our contact information and kind of the areas we cover. So, so with that, I want to say thank you. And with that link too, if you know of somebody that you think would be benefit from the information that was shared here, please feel free to send that link to them. And you can reach out to us at any point in time and get any more information that you want. And like I said, I will be sharing contact information for all 3 of our panelists. So if you want to reach out to them personally, feel free, and I'm sure that they will certainly get back to you at as quick as they possibly can. So with that, I want to say thank you again, and I hope all of you guys have a great day. And please let us know if there's anything we can help you with.